Imagine working your whole life to build a peaceful home for your family. And then one day, the very people who promised to protect the community destroy it with their own hands. This is the shocking story of Marcus Johnson, a hard-working black man who only wanted peace, but ended up fighting against his entire homeowners association. Marcus Johnson moved into Willow Creek Estates with a heart full of hope. For him, this neighborhood was supposed to be a dream. Wide yards, green trees, a quiet creek running behind his little house. That creek wasn't just water for Marcus. It was a piece of his childhood, a reminder of summers fishing with his father, of freedom, of life. But not everyone saw it that way. The HOA, the homeowners association that controlled the neighborhood, had always looked at Marcus differently. He was one of the very few black homeowners in the area, and though they never said anything directly, Marcus could feel the looks, the whispers, the constant complaints about his garden, his mailbox, even the color of his front door. At first, he ignored them. "Let it go, Marcus," his wife Leah would tell him. "We came here for peace, not fights." And for a while, he listened. But peace is a fragile thing. One morning, Marcus woke up to the sound of heavy machinery, trucks, bulldozers, men in hard hats. Confused, he stepped outside. They weren't on his property, but they were close. Too close, down by the creek. "Hey, what's going on here?" Marcus shouted, running toward them. One of the workers barely looked up. "Orders from the HOA," he muttered. Marcus's eyes widened as he saw wet gray cement pouring into the flowing water. The creek, his creek, was being filled with concrete. "What are you doing?" Marcus screamed. "This is natural water. You can't just block it up." But the men ignored him. Within hours, the gentle stream that had run behind his house was smothered, silenced, trapped under a cold gray slab of cement. Marcus felt like a part of his soul had been buried alive. That evening, he stormed into the HOA office. The board members sat around a shiny table, smiling politely as if nothing had happened. "You destroyed my creek." Marcus's voice cracked with anger. The chairwoman, a tall woman with icy blue eyes, calmly replied, "Mr. Johnson, the creek was a liability. Children could fall in. Mosquitoes breed there. It lowers property values. We made a decision in the best interest of the community." Marcus clenched his fists. "Best interest of the community? That creek was the heart of this neighborhood. You didn't ask, you didn't care, you just destroyed it." The board members exchanged glances. One of them smirked. "With all due respect, Mr. Johnson, perhaps you are being too emotional." "It's just water." "Just water?" Marcus whispered. He turned and left before his rage boiled over. But the story was only beginning. Days turned into weeks, and the first signs of disaster appeared. Rain came, as it always did in Willow Creek, but this time the water had nowhere to go. The concrete barrier trapped it, forcing it back into the soil, into the yards, into the basements of the very homes the HOA had sworn to protect. Neighbors began complaining. Lawns turned into muddy swamps. Gardens drowned. The smell of stagnant water filled the air, and yet, every time Marcus walked outside, all eyes turned to him. He heard the whispers, "This is his fault. He made such a big deal about the creek. Maybe he caused this." One evening, Leah came running inside, panic in her voice. "Marcus, come look!" He rushed out and froze. His backyard was gone, swallowed by a shallow lake of dirty brown water. His children's swing set was half underwater. The grass he had planted with his own hands drowned. Marcus sank to his knees, helpless. This is exactly what I warned them," he whispered. But he wasn't helpless. Not yet. The next HOA meeting was more crowded than ever. Angry homeowners shouted over each other, demanding answers. And in the middle of it all, Marcus stood tall. "You see," he said, pointing to pictures of his flooded yard. "You destroyed the creek, and now you've destroyed our homes. You thought you could silence me, but now your mistake is drowning all of us." The room erupted. Some neighbors looked at Marcus with new respect. Others still glared with suspicion. The chairwoman raised her voice, trying to restore order. "Everyone, please. We are working on solutions." But Marcus cut her off. "No, you caused this, and I'm not going to stop until you answer for it." The board members exchanged nervous looks. For the first time, Marcus saw something in their eyes he hadn't seen before. Not arrogance, not dismissal, fear. What would you do if a powerful group threatened your family just because you spoke the truth? Marcus Johnson had lost his creek, but now he feared he might lose something far more precious. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, the threatening note trembling in his hands. Leah stood behind him, her face pale. "Marcus, what does this mean?" she whispered. Marcus crumpled the paper in his fist. "It means they're scared. Scared that I won't shut up. Scared that the truth will come out. But what if they're serious?" Leah's eyes welled with tears. "What if they come after us?" Marcus turned to her, his voice steady but his heart racing. "Then we fight. We've been quiet for too long. I won't let them bully us into silence." That night, Marcus barely slept. Every creak of the house, every shadow outside the window made his pulse quicken. But deep down, fear only fueled his determination. The next morning, he began gathering evidence. Marcus walked through the swamp that had once been his backyard, snapping photos of drowned flower beds, broken fences, and muddy water lines on the walls of his neighbors' homes. He knocked on doors, talking to families who had once avoided him, asking them to share their stories. Some turned him away, but some finally opened up. An elderly man named Mr. Jenkins sighed as Marcus showed him the pictures. "I told them this was a bad idea," he said, "but they never listen. Maybe if we stand together." A young mother, holding her crying toddler, pointed to her flooded basement. "We lost everything down there. If you're fighting them, we're with you." Marcus's hope grew. Slowly, the community that had once isolated him began to realize he wasn't their enemy. He was their voice, but the HOA wasn't done. At the next board meeting, the atmosphere was electric. Neighbors packed the room, their voices rising in anger. Marcus stood up, holding a thick folder of evidence. "These are pictures, statements, proof. You destroyed a natural waterway, and now you're destroying lives. We demand answers." The chairwoman's smile was thin, her eyes cold. "Mr. Johnson, while we appreciate your passion, this board has acted within its rights. The creek was dangerous. It was our duty to fill it." "Dangerous?" Marcus's voice shook with fury. "The only thing dangerous here is your arrogance. Look around. Homes are swamps. Children can't play outside. Families are losing everything because of you." The room erupted with shouts of agreement. For the first time, the board seemed cornered. But then the chairwoman leaned forward, her voice low and sharp. "Be careful, Mr. Johnson. You're walking on thin ice." Marcus stared at her. "So am I supposed to stay quiet while my family drowns?" Her lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Silence might keep them safe. A chill ran through the room. That night, as Marcus drove home, headlights flared in his rearview mirror. A black SUV tailed him down the quiet road. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. The SUV didn't pass, didn't back off, just followed. Marcus's heart pounded. He took a sudden turn onto a side street. The SUV followed. He sped up. It sped up. Panic surged through him. Finally, he turned sharply into a gas station, slamming the brakes. The SUV stopped at the corner, idling for a long, tense moment. Then, without a word, it drove away. Marcus sat frozen, sweat dripping down his face. He realized this was no longer about a creek. This was war. Leah begged him to let it go. "Marcus, please. They're dangerous. We have kids. I don't care about the creek anymore. I just want you safe." Marcus took her hands in his. "Leah, it's not just about the creek. It's about what's right. If I let them get away with this, what will they do next? To us? To our children? To every family here?" Leah's tears fell silently, but she nodded. She knew there was no turning back. Days later, Marcus's fight took a turn. A journalist from the local newspaper showed up at his door. "I've been hearing stories about Willow Creek Estates," she said. "Flooded homes, angry residents. And your name keeps coming up. Care to talk?" Marcus hesitated. The threat still echoed in his mind. But then he thought of Leah, of his children, of his neighbors who had trusted him. "Yes," he said firmly. "I'll talk." For hours, he poured out everything. The filling of the creek, the flooding, the intimidation, the SUV. The journalist took notes, her eyes wide. This could be big," she whispered. "Bigger than just your neighborhood. If this gets out, the HOA could be in serious trouble." Marcus felt a flicker of hope, but hope can be dangerous. 2 nights later, Marcus returned home to find his mailbox smashed, his car windshield shattered. Spray painted across his garage door were the words, "Stop now." His children cried as Leah pulled them inside. Marcus stood in the driveway, fists clenched, fury boiling. They wanted him to break, to give up, but instead their threats only made him stronger. The next morning, the story hit the front page. Local HOA accused of flooding neighborhood after filling creek. Pictures of drowned lawns and angry residents spread across social media. News crews swarmed the neighborhood. The HOA board was suddenly silent. But silence, Marcus knew, was never the end. The sound of rushing water had become a nightmare for the residents. Every night they lay awake, listening to the swampy pools forming where once children used to play. The HOA had thought filling the creek with concrete would silence a man they considered troublesome. But instead, it had cursed the entire neighborhood. The mosquitoes had doubled. Strange smells rose from the standing water, and the lush green yards were now drowned under brown, murky waves. Mothers couldn't let their children play outside anymore, and fathers came home angry after long days, unable to relax in the soggy ruins of what used to be their dream homes. In the middle of all this chaos, Marcus stood tall. He had warned them. He had begged them not to fill the creek. He had told them again and again that nature always takes its revenge. But no one had listened. One evening, as the sky turned red with the last light of day, a group of neighbors gathered at Marcus's doorstep. Their clothes were muddy, their faces tired, and their eyes filled with regret. Mrs. Thompson, the elderly woman who had once voted against Marcus in every meeting, stepped forward. "Marcus," she said softly, her voice trembling, "we were wrong. The HOA was wrong. We should have listened to you." For a long moment, Marcus didn't reply. He looked at their faces, at the despair written across them. Inside, he felt a storm. Part of him wanted to shout, "I told you so." But another part saw the children clinging to their mothers, afraid, and his heart softened. "This isn't about being right," Marcus finally said. "This is about saving our homes before the swamp swallows them completely." The neighbors exchanged hopeful glances. "Can you help us?" one man asked.
"Do you know what we should do?"
Marcus nodded slowly. "Yes, but it won't be easy." "And the HOA? They won't like what I'm about to do." The crowd grew silent. Everyone knew the HOA still held power, and crossing them meant heavy fines, endless harassment, and possibly losing their homes. But Marcus's voice carried a conviction stronger than fear. "We need to break the concrete," he declared. Gasps rippled through the group. Break the concrete? That meant tearing down the HOA's project, the very thing they had paid thousands of dollars to install. "But they'll sue us," a man cried. Marcus shook his head. "If we don't act now, the swamp will destroy everything anyway. Lawsuits won't matter when your homes are unlivable." There was a long silence. Then slowly people began to nod. For the first time in months, hope flickered. That night, under the cover of darkness, Marcus led a small team of neighbors to the creek. They brought hammers, shovels, and crowbars. The moonlight glistened on the damp ground as they approached the slab of concrete that had blocked the natural flow of water. "Are we really doing this?" whispered a young father. "We have to," Marcus replied firmly. "For our children." The first strike echoed like thunder. Metal hit stone and chips of concrete flew. Sweat dripped from their brows as they pounded again and again, the sound mixing with the croaks of frogs and the buzz of insects. Hours passed, but slowly, cracks began to spread across the surface. Then it happened. With a deafening roar, water burst through the fractures. The trapped creek, furious after months of suffocation, exploded forward, tearing away chunks of concrete. The force knocked two men off their feet, and everyone scrambled back, shouting in alarm. But Marcus stood firm, watching as the water rushed free, carving its natural path once again. It was both terrifying and beautiful. By dawn, the swamp had begun to drain. The standing pools shrank and the air smelled fresher. Neighbors, exhausted but triumphant, collapsed onto the grass, tears in their eyes. For the first time, they believed they could reclaim their homes. But the battle wasn't over. The HOA arrived that morning, furious. Their president, Mr. Carlisle, stormed into the neighborhood with a lawyer by his side. "Who did this?" he shouted, pointing at the broken creek. "This is destruction of property. This is vandalism!" Dozens of residents stepped forward. "We all did," Mrs. Thompson declared boldly. "You filled our creek with concrete, and you destroyed our homes. We fixed what you broke." Carlisle's face turned red with rage. "You'll pay for this, every last one of you." But Marcus raised his voice. "No, you will pay. For months you ignored warnings. You silenced voices. You let pride and prejudice guide your decisions. And now the entire neighborhood has suffered." The crowd cheered. their fear melting into unity. For the first time, they weren't divided. They stood together strong and unafraid. Carlyle stuttered, realizing he had lost control. His lawyer whispered frantically in his ear. But the residents weren't listening anymore. They had chosen Marcus as their true leader. The HOA had created a swamp, but Marcus had given them hope, and hope, once awakened, was unstoppable. When greed and pride blind people, they destroy not only nature but also their own peace. But when a community unites with courage and stands for what's right, even the strongest walls of injustice can be broken.